Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Professor James A. Russell from Monterey. He's an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Now, sir, first the ATACMS, now the Storm Shadow missiles. All of these are Russia's perceived red lines that have been crossed. How do you feel Russia will respond? That's the big concern at this point, considering, of course, that the offensive has continued since it began its invasion of Ukraine. So what's really left going ahead?
Well, this is the $64,000 question. Why the Biden administration decided suddenly to allow the use of these weapons against Russia. And just to be clear, this is not just the ATACMS systems. There are American personnel inside Ukraine who are operating these systems. This places the United States directly in conflict with the Russians. I think this is an extremely reckless, irresponsible, and dangerous escalation by the Biden administration, and sort of reeks of an extremely sort of cynical move on their part to try to ensure that the war doesn't end on their watch, so to speak, which the deadline is coming up in January, of course, with the change of administration. And I'm aghast at such a move without a word from the president to explain why he thinks this is necessary. These missiles are not going to change the course of the war, either the British missiles or the American missiles. The Russians are on the march on the front. And for all practical purposes, the Ukrainians are being driven back. And it's been a horrible war of attrition that by some estimates has cost 1 million casualties on both sides.
Professor,
Yeah,
I just wanted to come in there as far as Russia's response is concerned, because now it's going to come. You're not going to Ukraine is not going to get away with, striking deep inside Russian territory, knowing how Russia has been all through history. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Traditionally, or I would say, almost every time we've seen any kind of escalation, Russia's soon, and it's quick to show some kind of nuclear saber rattling. But it's already done all that there was to be done till a nuclear strike is actually carried out. They've done the drills, they've changed, their rules of law, and Putin has already cleared that as well. At this point, is the only thing left now for Russia to do is an actual nuclear strike? And if they don't do that, that may reflect on them that it was all just a bluff.
Well, all we can do in the international community is hope that is not the case, that the Russians exercise caution, recognize that these systems are not going to alter the course of the war, and that they're in an extremely strong position. They're winning on the battlefield. But this begs the question, why would the Biden administration have put the onus on the Russians like this to respond, stay faced in this extremely dangerous situation in which the Russians themselves several days ago enunciate a new nuclear doctrine where they basically are publicly stating but they are lowering the threshold for the consideration under which they will use tactical nuclear weapons. So what does the Biden administration do? They've created circumstances that could lead to this, the first use of nuclear weapons since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I am appalled and aghast at the decisions that the Biden administration has taken that has placed, it's not just the Ukrainians, this is the world we're talking about. Nuclear use, the use of nuclear weapons. And the Russian foreign minister was pretty clear about this. I think it was today, somebody stuck a microphone in front of him and he said, this is a qualitative different situation. And we are going to respond appropriately to this. And the Russians have been very open and honest with us about this, which you, in your excellent report, noted, which is that these red lines have now been crossed, and it puts the onus on the Russians to respond and places us, the international community, into hoping that sanity prevails. And as I said, I just cannot fathom why the Biden administration took these steps.
Right.
two weeks ago, the British the British Prime Minister was in Washington, and we reaffirmed that we were not going to allow these long-range weapons to be striking inside Russia. Yep.
Exactly on that point, and this is something that we've been discussing for quite a few days as well. In fact, we had someone on the show with us yesterday, and this is exactly the question that we posed to him as well, as to why Biden would decide in the final stretch of his presidency to now give Ukraine the go-ahead to use missiles for long-range strikes within Russian territory. Now, their opinion was that this is perhaps so that when Trump comes in and both the sides are on the negotiating table, Ukraine does have enough on its end as well and does not feel cornered. That's one perspective to look at it. But of course, the question remains, at a time when Trump has time and again said that he will end the war within 24 hours, get both sides on the negotiating table, why would the outgoing administration take this decision at this point, which is, I believe, what you were saying as well? This is a question that's baffled everyone.
Exactly. Is this the smooth and peaceful transition of power that we were talking about, that the incoming and outgoing president shook hands on?
Of course, we don't know what the past between these two leaders.
Yes.
But it looks from the vantage point here in the United States that it's an extremely, and I can't emphasize this enough, an extremely cynical ploy by the Biden administration to try to keep the war going past January 20th, so that when the defeat finally comes, as it is coming, that will happen under Trump as opposed to under Biden, as if somehow this is going to allow them to escape the culpability for this epic strategic disaster, right? I mean, the United States is faced with these two strategic disasters right now. It's in Ukraine, and of course, it's in the Middle East, in Lebanon and Gaza, where the United States has stood up for the continuation of these wars. It's complete insanity. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm sorry to be using such strong language, but it is just absolutely baffling.
Professor Russell, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it also reminds me of when Trump had entered that deal with the Taliban in Doha, and then the first thing that Biden had to do was pull out the US troops from Afghanistan as soon as he came in, and it really sets the ground for something really difficult for Trump as soon as he's coming in now with just weeks left to go before he comes in. There'll be lots more to discuss going forward, but we'll have to wrap it up as of now. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA, sir. That was Professor James Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.